If you're like I was, frustrated with people around you, exhausted trying to change people, and feeling like you're doing all the work in your relationships, this might be the missing piece you've been looking for. My name is Deb Blum, and this is the Whole Soul Way. It's my signature program that I've been teaching for the past 4 years, and I decided to offer the foundation lessons, exercises, and tools for free on YouTube and all of the major podcast channels. Because I truly believe that the world needs more of us healed, whole, authentic, and awake. And you know what? I don't want to be a barrier to anyone getting the help that they need. And in fact, I really want to be part of the change. Each lesson builds on the last. So if this is your first time here, make sure that you start at the beginning. This is your invitation. Show up, do the work, and join the movement of souls who are committed to creating a better world, one inner transformation at a time. Let's dive in. Hey, beautiful soul, welcome back. Today, I want to talk about something that I think is really important that we all know. And I kind of can't believe that we don't teach this in school. It would be so helpful for people to take more responsibility for themselves. Here's the thing, I was a huge judger. I was very judgmental. I remember my mom said, I was such an accepting and tolerant person, and I raised my kids to be that way too. How did I end up with a kid who was so judgmental? Seriously. And I just thought that was normal. I just thought that that's just what people do. And I had no idea that being a judgmental person was actually something that I could learn from and grow from. So, what I want to talk about today is the concept of projection. It's a thing, it's a human thing that we do. You think, and I think, that judging and assessing and seeing other people's flaws or looking at another person and the way they do things that we think they need to change is just part of life. Everybody does it. But once you understand that there's this concept called projection that we do, we realize that we can use our projections to come into greater levels of self-love, wholeness. We could feel more alive. We can find things out about ourselves that we didn't know. We can learn about ourselves. And I'm telling you, when I learned it, I was blown away and it changed everything for me. And I want you to understand it too, because if you're like I was, frustrated with people around you, exhausted trying to change people, and feeling like you're doing all the work in your relationships, this might be the missing piece you've been looking for. So, why don't we start by talking about what projection is? So, from a psychological perspective, projection is the psychological process that lets us see parts of ourselves that we fear are unlovable, unacceptable, or in some way we learned in our childhood we are not allowed to be that way. Parts that have been banished into our unconscious mind. It's where we put all of our traits, emotions, impulses away onto another person so we don't have to face them and feel them in ourselves. So, you know how you can't see your face without looking in the mirror? You really can't. Maybe you can kind of look a little bit and see a little corner of your nose or something like that, but you're never going to see your face without either looking in a mirror or in a picture. And the same thing is actually happening for your unconscious mind. Other people act as mirrors for your unconscious mind. So the things that really trigger you or bother you a lot, they irritate you, or you find yourself judging harshly in other people, those are usually projections. That's your unconscious mind trying to show you something. There's a saying, you spot it, you got it. That's kind of what we're talking about here. Or you might have heard, like, if you point one finger at another person, three fingers point back at you. This is why when we judge another person, it actually says a lot more about us than it does about them. Brene Brown puts it perfectly. She says that research tells us that we judge people in areas where we're vulnerable to shame, especially picking folks who are doing worse than we are doing. If I feel good about my parenting, then I have no interest in judging another person's choices. If I feel good about my body, I don't go around making fun of other people's weight or appearance. We're hard on ourselves because we're using each other as a launching pad out of our own perceived shaming deficiency. So our judgments are pointing toward something inside of us that we feel some shame around, that we've decided unconsciously, maybe even consciously, we are not that. We've exiled, orphaned, disowned them. We're like, I am not that. And here's the thing about it is that ultimately our soul longs for wholeness. Ultimately, there is a part of us that's calling us home to ourselves. And when we are judging another person, we can just keep doing that. Or we can say, oh my gosh, I am being given an opportunity to discover parts that are in my unconscious mind, and I can reclaim them. So I would say these parts are ready to be seen and explored in you. And that's why you're seeing it in another person. They're acting as a mirror and you're projecting your unconscious mind onto them. And I think that the more judgy we feel, sometimes it starts to almost get amplified in a person. And when we really can't tolerate that, that's usually our soul saying, like, come on, people, we got to understand projection here. You're doing that thing. This is your chance to reclaim access to that part. As Carl Jung would say, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Let's talk about why this matters so much. I want to paint a picture of what life looks like when you don't understand projection. Constantly frustrated with other people, saying perhaps your husband is emotionally unavailable, or your friend is too materialistic, your coworker is lazy, your mother is controlling. You spend a lot of time and energy trying to get them to change, trying to help them, to fix them, help them to see what they're doing wrong. But probably if you've tried that, you realize that nothing is changing. Or maybe they do change temporarily, but it goes right back. And you're exhausted and you're resentful and you feel like you're stuck in the same patterns over and over again. Here's the thing, you are using so much energy, so much life force energy, trying to push away the parts of you that you don't want to see and trying to never be selfish, never be lazy, never be disrespectful. And truly, it is draining the life force right out of you. You can't fully be you. You can't be whole. You're probably performing, maybe proving, monitoring yourself for your behaviors, defending against the parts of you that are just there. They're there. The human imperfection, just part of being alive. But when you understand projection and you start to see what's happening in your life, things start to shift because suddenly your judgments become a doorway instead of this dead end, this powerless place. Your frustrations become a map showing you exactly where you need to go to find more freedom. And your relationships become those mirrors. They're reflecting back the parts of you that you're ready to see and maybe even to accept and love and integrate. You stop trying to change everybody else and you start reclaiming parts of yourself that you've been rejecting. And in that reclamation, you find wholeness. You find more peace, not just with other people, but peace inside of yourself. And one thing I know is that wholeness is really the pathway to aliveness. It's when we feel fully connected to ourselves that we feel more life force flowing through us, more aliveness. So we find the energy or free up the energy to thrive instead of just survive. So this is why it matters. But I want to also speak to something else that a lot of people struggle with when we start to talk about this concept. And that is the idea that you don't want to be that way. The idea that you're like, hey, listen, I don't want to be a selfish person. I don't want to be a person who is disrespectful to other people. In fact, I abhor those things about myself. And so I don't know why you would ever want me to do this. Let's just be really, really clear. This is kind of about not arguing with reality. Usually, what we're doing is we're arguing with reality. It's there. You and I both know that there's a part of you that could be disrespectful if you were in the right circumstances. You know that you've probably been selfish. You've probably even been lazy before. So we know it's there. So it's not about saying we're going to become this thing. It's about saying, I'm no longer going to keep it in the shadows. I'm no longer going to hide this and pretend it doesn't exist in me. Instead, I'm going to bring it out and I'm going to look at it like Carl Jung talks about, make the unconscious conscious, look at it like Brene Brown says, shine a light on it so the shame can't live anymore. Look at it and say, oh, you're not as scary as I thought. Oh, why did I start doing that? So we're not talking about becoming so-called bad parts. We're talking about reclaiming access to all of these parts and realizing they're part of the human condition, that the human being has an incredibly wide range of impulses, instincts, actions, behaviors, feelings, fears, needs, and no part of being human is inherently wrong or bad. It's really about being conscious about them and then choosing how to show up in your life. And what we know, as Carl Jung says, and certainly I know it's been my own experience, is that when we're not conscious of the things that are in the unconscious mind or in the shadows, they tend to kind of seep out in our lives and they affect our lives through judging and also sometimes just through behavior showing up and we're shocked that this thing happened. Maybe you're always a really patient person and you just lose it on somebody and you aren't patient with them at all. And you're like, what happened to me in that moment? That's the shadow. That's the shadow coming out. And the more that we shine a light on it, then the more that we can choose. It doesn't choose for us. Let's talk about a few ways this shows up in real life. Maybe you say that your friend is super materialistic, but if you're honest, maybe there are things that you want too, things that you secretly desire, but you won't let yourself have it because you've made wanting things wrong. When you judge this materialism, you might be pushing away your own desires, your own appreciation for beauty and comfort, because somewhere maybe you decided that makes you shallow. Again, it's not about you becoming materialistic. Sometimes it's just admitting that all of us have some materialism in us and then choosing, but not letting yourself be run by the old story that says that you're shallow if you like having really nice jeans or you're shallow if you like having a nice car. Another one that maybe we might say is she's so selfish. But oftentimes when we say someone's selfish, it could be just that they're standing up for themselves. They're saying what they want or what they need. Now, I'm sure there are some people who are on extreme ends of the spectrum, but I think sometimes we also see in another person that they're doing something like setting a boundary or saying no. And then our judgment of them is showing us parts of us that's so scared to take up space or to prioritize ourselves or ask for what we need. Here's another one. Maybe we say about our partner that they're emotionally unavailable. But here's the harder question. Are you emotionally available? Oftentimes, when we look at another person and we say that, we're really struggling with it ourselves. Maybe we're not emotionally available to ourselves. Maybe not to our partner. Maybe we're waiting for them to go first, to be the one that takes the lead, to show us how to be emotionally available because we're really scared and we don't know how. Maybe we're desiring emotional intimacy and we're also terrified of it. So, this is something that I think many of us don't really want to face, but we don't fully appreciate how amazing it is when we do face it, that we're living in a deeper level of reality, that we are reclaiming access to more of ourselves. And so we feel more whole and we feel more alive and we feel more real, like in touch with reality. So let's talk about one of the tools that you can use to find these projections. But I first want to say being in the whole soul way and learning the whole soul way concepts is 100% the pathway, for sure. And I found personally that Byron Katie's The Work has been so incredibly helpful for me. It's something that now I automatically do. And it's a way that you can learn how to find your projections and then learn how to shift from the judgment being just simply a judgment to the judgment being a process for reclaiming access to more of yourself and healing. So, this is Byron Katie's The Work, and you could find it at thework.com. It's really simple, incredibly profound, and for some people, really, really hard. Here's how it works. So, these are the 4 steps in the Judge Your Neighbor worksheet. So, the first question is it true? And let me just be really clear, answer this honestly. There's no right answer. The second question is, can you absolutely know it's true? This is where some of my judgments started to fall apart a little bit. The third question is, how do you react or what happens? How do you show up? How do you feel when you believe that thought? And the fourth question is, who would you be without that thought? But for me, the magic was actually in the turnaround. Don't get me wrong, steps 1 through 4 were incredible for me, but the turnaround is really where the magic was. And this is when you turn the statement around to yourself and find examples of how it's true. I'm going to make it seem so simple, but there are probably thousands of Byron Katie videos out there of her doing this work where you can practice this, but we're just going to do a simplistic look at it right now. And so if we say that my friend is so materialistic, we would turn it around multiple ways. So we would say something like, I am materialistic. And then what you would look for is real examples in your life where you're materialistic. Maybe it's, I'm not materialistic. And then find all the examples of the opposite. Perhaps we turn it around to, my friend is not materialistic, and find ways where our friend is also not materialistic. Maybe it's, my thinking is materialistic. Maybe I'm materialistic in my thinking about materialism. You see where I'm going? You can play around with this. But what you're trying to do, if you're honest with yourself, is poke holes in your certainty, in the certainty that that person is that way, that person is bad for being that way, that we shouldn't be this way, that there is shame to be felt for being this way. And we start to see the projection and we get access to these disowned parts. Again, it's not about becoming them, it's just about saying, materialism is part of being a person to some degree, and that's okay. And to find our way through it in such a way that we can have more compassion for, geesh, we do live in this world where everybody's buying everything and it feels like we should be having all the best of everything. And I can have some compassion for myself that I sometimes want that too. Maybe it's going back and looking at what you learned as a child and what beliefs were there, starting to unpack those and say, wait a second, that's what my parents' beliefs were. That's not even how I feel about it anymore. I know for me, when I had these aha moments that, geesh, I actually kind of do that, maybe just not as badly as they do, I started to have a lot of softening happening in my being. And it gave me so much relief to not have to hold on to being the one that knows the right way, the one that knows that you should be good, and the pressure that I put on myself to be good all the time, and the pressure that I put on other people to live up to my high standards. It was really an uncomfortable and heavy burden to carry for me. Hey there, Deb here. Just one quick interruption. If you've been diving into the Whole Soul Way round 1, the foundation and core lessons, and you're finding that it's really resonating with you, that is amazing. Now, some of you will get so much out of this free content, and that will be enough. But if you ever feel called to take it deeper, or you think you'd like a little bit more support, just know that there is a whole journey waiting for you inside our full program. Joining the full Whole Soul Way container means that you'll be part of a community, not just any community, a community of people who are incredibly committed to their journey, who are engaged, empathetic, and so inspiring. And this community and my leadership means that you get more support and contextualization to your own life. Also, you'll have access to rounds 2 and 3 and future rounds that I create, where we take what you've learned in the foundations and then practice applying it to the nuance of our lives. We experience deeper embodiment of the healing, and it really allows us to step more fully into this way of living. This is really where the deeper transformation unfolds when you have the support you need, community, in a container that's really sacred and safe. So if this is speaking to you, I definitely would say check out the full program and see if and how we could support your growth on an even deeper level. You can check it out at thewholesomeway.com/program. Okay, let's get back to it. I wonder for you if you can find some of this that's true. And then I think on the flip side, one of the things to notice with this is that if this is true for me, then it's true for others. So if another person is being judgmental to you, maybe you can start to let that go a little bit and say, that's their judgment. That's actually their stuff. Now, there might be stuff in there for you to look at too. Not going to deny that. There could be things that are matching in you and you feel like when they judge you that it's touching on a point of view that you judge in yourself. But I'm just trying to make the point that we're all really trying to do the best we can. And the journey really is for us to come into our wholeness and look at this amazing chance that we have with projection to do that. So let's talk about the phrase that is used in shadow work that I love that's called eating your projections. I know it sounds a little bit weird at first, but bear with me for a second because this metaphor is actually pretty powerful. When you eat your projection, what you're doing is you're taking it back. You're consuming it. You're reintegrating that part of yourself that you've been leaving out there on other people. Imagine you're metabolizing it into your body. So instead of saying that's his problem or her flaw, you bring it back inside of yourself and you digest it. You make it part of your wholeness again. So when you project, you're essentially throwing parts of yourself away, like you're tossing them onto other people because you don't want to hold them yourself. They're too uncomfortable or maybe too shameful, too unacceptable, too risky. But the fact of the matter is those parts don't disappear. They're still yours. They're here. You're just trying not to acknowledge them or to let them show up. You're like holding it all down, trying to suppress it all. And the fact is that they're actually scattered everywhere, attached to everyone around you. And eating your projections means gathering up those scattered parts and bringing them home. It means saying, yeah, there is some materialism in me, and I can be selfish. And yes, there is some laziness in me, and that's okay because I'm human. It doesn't make me bad, it just makes me whole. And here's what's really beautiful about this is that when you eat your projections, when you take them back and you integrate them, you stop being so controlled by them. You stop having to avoid them or defend against them. You can choose how you really want to be in the world consciously instead of being driven by all these unconscious reactions. One of the biggest reasons why we become judgmental is because when we were young, we learned there were acceptable and unacceptable parts of ourselves. And so we put those parts of ourselves into the shadows. And those are the parts that show up when we judge other people. And we judge them because, to be completely honest with you, at some level, you feel that when people are showing that way of being, that it threatens our own beliefs, for one. And for two, if we love and care about that person, we might even feel that them being that way is putting their own lives at risk. So if they're being disrespectful, we're actually afraid that if they show up disrespectful to people, then they're going to get rejected, or they're going to get abandoned, or they're going to be humiliated. And so in some ways, our attempts to get them to stop doing those things is because inside we are so terrified of being that way because we're afraid that we would be rejected or abandoned. And now we are afraid they are too. So you could actually say we're trying to help them. We're saying, stop being that way because that's a very dangerous way to be in the world. But when we come in and we reflect on the concept of that it's dangerous, we realize it was dangerous for us maybe as a little child, but is it really dangerous for us now? You know, does setting a boundary serve us, even if another person may feel that that crossed the line into disrespect? It's a big question for us to ask ourselves. And I think to add to this, those people, those systems, so to speak, they really rejected parts of ourselves. And if we keep on hiding those into the shadows and not bringing them to our awareness, we're perpetuating rejection onto ourselves. So it's bad enough that you already had to get hurt by being rejected and by feeling like you couldn't be your whole true self. But then for you to pick up the baton and then now beat yourself up for being that way or hold yourself to these excruciatingly high standards really is ultimately an incredibly painful thing to do. And that's not really what it was supposed to be. They were just trying the best they could to help you to become a good person in the world. And now the question is, do you trust yourself enough to realize that you can set boundaries and still be a good person? You can be lazy and chill on the couch and still be safe and okay. You can want materialistic things sometimes, and that doesn't make you a bad person. This is an incredibly important and hard lesson to learn, but I want you to learn it and understand it because I really believe this is such a pathway for you to become your whole self, to show up as the truth of who you are, to not make excuses, to not make yourself wrong and bad, and not need to make other people wrong and bad. Because at the end of the day, we ultimately end up finding ourselves more in love with everybody when we don't have so much self-judgment that we're projecting onto them. We start to realize, oh, wait, I actually love and accept myself. And now I find myself loving and accepting other people too. This is a massively, critically important way for us to really spread peace in the world from the inside out. And that's why I think we should be teaching it at a young age. When we have these things that are hiding in the recesses of our unconscious mind, they're in there and we are trying to suppress them all the time. It's like holding beach balls down underneath the water. And you know what that's like. You can only hold down so many beach balls before they start popping up. And oftentimes, when you're ready to do this work, you'll notice that things start popping up in your life, things that you used to be able to control and you can't control them anymore. Mistakes, maybe that you make, or something happens and it forces you to lay on the couch more and be lazy, or whatever these things are. And I want you to know that when these things pop up, you can look at them as, oh man, like this thing always is happening to me these days, or I made that mistake, and just try to double down and be more perfect. I'm going to give you an example. I actually was meticulous about paying bills, meticulous. And I one day had this bill that didn't get paid, and I had never gotten it in the mail. This was back when you used to get a piece of mail, and maybe you did it online, or maybe you did it with a check. It didn't really make a difference, but I never got the actual bill, and I didn't think about it, and I didn't pay it. And so we had to pay a fee on it. And I was pretty mortified by it. But something did come up. I had a little voice in the back of my head that was like, Deb, you didn't die. You didn't die. You're still safe. You're still okay. You're not a bad person because you didn't pay a bill. And it really was the beginning of me loosening my tight grip on my high expectations and my perfectionism, because I realized that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to be imperfect. It's okay to be ways that someone else might judge. So I think you're getting my point. And by the way, I'm not talking about all of the pieces that I would like to talk about here, because this is what the Whole Soul Way program is really about, is how to lovingly meet and accept these parts of ourselves, and to recognize that every aspect of humanity has a dark and a light, and that they're all just a continuum rather than good or bad. They're just a continuum. And we talk about that in polarities in the program. But one of the things we also talk about, and you'll hear me talk about this a lot, is this concept of having a drop of something. The magic is in the drop. Like if you're always selfless, maybe a drop of selfishness will help you to set a boundary or stand up for yourself. If you're always busy, just doing all the time, maybe one drop of laziness will allow you to indulge in a lazy, unproductive Sunday morning when it's raining out. And you find out that it really nourishes your soul in ways that being busy never does. Maybe if you're always nice, maybe a drop of mean might help you to speak your truth instead of people pleasing. Do you see where I'm going with that? When you allow yourself to shine a light on these shadow parts, you discover this kind of delicious middle space. You don't need to deny anything, and you don't need to become something. You free up so much energy that was needed to not be something. And you find this sweet spot that I call wholeness. And wholeness is really how we become more alive, more connected. We stop performing and we start being. We start being real. Let's come back to where we started. Why do you need to know about projection? Because when you understand projection, you stop being a victim to everyone else's behavior. Let's say their bad behavior. And you stop waiting for the world to change so you can finally feel okay. Instead, you become conscious. You become whole. You reclaim your power. You harness those judgments that you have for other people as more of a compass, pointing you home to yourself instead of using them to attack others or yourself. When we keep them in the darkness, they really do haunt us. They come out in all kinds of surprising ways and they control us from the shadows. But when we make the unconscious conscious, when we meet these parts with at least curiosity and the willingness to include them, and maybe with acceptance and love, we become free. We become whole. And from that wholeness, we get to show up in our relationships with more love, more compassion, more authenticity for sure. We show up in our lives as who we're truly meant to be, not a carefully curated, super defended version of ourselves, but the whole and real, beautiful, complex, flawsome person that we were always meant to be. So here's what I'd like you to do. I want you to pay attention to your judgments. And when you notice yourself getting irritated and frustrated with someone, get curious. Ask yourself, what part of me am I seeing in them? What am I afraid to acknowledge in myself? Maybe you might want to try Byron Katie's work. Write down your judgments and do the turnarounds. See what you discover. And remember, this isn't about making yourself wrong. It's about making yourself whole. And you have got this. You totally have got this. And one last thing I want to say about this is that this doesn't just come to an end. It's amazing how many layers we have of this. So the more work we do, the more free and whole and alive we feel. And it leads to deeper layers. I'm always finding a new place where I say to myself, not this one, they're really being that way. And then I find out, no, 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 it's still some form of a projection. There's still some part of me that's longing to be included in the wholeness of who I am. So it gets tricky sometimes, but if you can believe it and you believe it in your heart of hearts and you're willing to eat your projections, I promise you, it will be life-changing. So until next time, keep doing the deep inner work. It's worth it, and you're worth it.